Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who you're getting a little taste in New England down there tonight, aren't you?
I don't know if you sent it our way or not, but it was negative 10 degrees today.
Oh my God.
I tried to take Miles to school, and we have a van that has the doors on the very back.
Right.
And when I went out to put him in, I hit the button, frozen shut. I had to load the kid in from the trunk, put the seats down so he could go to school. And when I dropped him off, I had to open up the trunk, and they're looking at me, and I was, what are you going to do? The doors are froze. So, yeah, it's cold today. So I imagine it's cold here in West Virginia. But I also, we found out it was actually snowing, I believe, in Destin.
Yeah, Destin, Florida. I was also, for example, saw images of snow on Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
Oh, boy. What about you? Were you getting any snow, or is it just cold?
Well, we actually got some snow Sunday into Monday night. In fact, that's the first snow we've had in quite a while. So I broke out. By the way, I want to show this off because, of course, with temperatures as low as they are in Florida, this is the time when people run into the gift shops and buy the what does your bride call them? The big shirts, the
spirit jerseys,
and sweatshirts and that sort of thing. But we were down there for a fan event. Judging by the shirt, this has to be 6 years ago, because take a look at this. This is the sweatshirt that I bought in 2019. But the reason I bought it in 2019 is I already knew the name of the fourth theme park, which again, Epic Universe. And look at the what it says on the shirt.
Oh,
the Epic Adventures at Universal Studios. So they were already sort of walking that name out. Even 5 and 6 years.
Look at that. You know. And you buying that might have led to them doing that. You know, great merchandise sales on this shirt that had the word Epic, and next thing you know is that's the name of the theme park.
If we're being completely honest here, I think I bought it off of because again, I think the event was in late November. In fact, I know it was November because we watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade in the park. So this was on the 50% rack. I was, they were already pushing the 2020 merch. I was being a flinty New Englander, not paying full price, but I wanted to be warm. So I bought that.
I'm with you.
All right.
No, it's really funny how quickly the people run in and get the sweatshirts at $80 a pop. And you don't even hesitate. I'm freezing.
There we go. I'm at Florida, I'm freezing. But again, normally you go to Florida, you don't freeze. And that's why, if you're thinking about traveling to Florida, we'd like you to check out the show's new sponsor, which is Be Our Guest Vacations. Planning your next getaway? Let Be Our Guest Vacations handle the details. As a platinum-level earmarked travel agency, they specialize in providing concierge-level services for trips to Universal Orlando, Hollywood, the Disney parks, cruises, and so much more. Their experienced team takes the stress out of planning, so all you have to do is enjoy an epic vacation. Visit beourguestvacations.com today to get started, and don't forget to tell them that the Epic Universal podcast sent you. So, all right, let's slide into the news this week, and not as much fun start to the news.
No, there's a lot happened since the last time we talked.
This is true, especially out west. Yeah.
Out west. So one of the biggest stories that has to be for a long time is the wildfires in California. And that actually caused Universal to close, I believe, January 9th. So I don't know how often the parks close out west, usually it takes a hurricane down here in Florida, but it's not common to close a theme park, but they closed on the 9th. They did reopen on the 10th, but there was, we were paying close attention. I think this is the first time I actually had friends in California. I'm not super well traveled to have friends everywhere, but geez, Brian and Jim and even Drew are all Californian. So I was paying close attention, not to mention that your daughter, right?
Yep. Alice is out there as well. I mean, mind you, she's down in Long Beach where and Mr. Schul is well to the north, but both Drew and Brian were kind of down there in the mix. And again, what's interesting about Universal closing is it wasn't just the air quality, which it's still kind of horrendous out there, but it was also the fact that their team members, to be honest, had been impacted by both the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire. And so as of right now, both these fires are better contained, but they're still blazing. And why don't you share what a friend of the show, Ashley,
oh yeah, she was, so I love having people in Hollywood and over in that direction. We're always going back and forth on Instagram, and she's showing kind of the cool stuff that's happening at Universal Hollywood. So she was actually the one that broke the news to me when Universal was closing, and she was kind of giving some information over there. And this whole time, almost back and forth, like, how are things? Like, and it's odd for me because I'm not really familiar. I mean, I've obviously been to Disneyland and I know enough about California geography, but like all this, I'm not really sure where anything is and how close it's coming to the parks. But she was kind of giving us an update on all that. But I think at this point in time, and it was getting pretty close and pretty bad because it wasn't just one pocket. I think the Palisades were like the start, and then there's like a heat map almost. There's like a website you could go to. And I think she even sent some screenshots of like, hey, look at this. So it was not good by any means. And I don't know how far it's contained now, but they could use some of our cold weather. I mean, to chill things out.
Something else they could also use is some of our cold cash. So,
right.
If you want to help folks who have been affected by the wildfires out in California, we're going to suggest you visit redcross.org. Or you could call 1-800-RED-CROSS. That's for the number impaired. That's 733-2767. Or you could just text Cal Wildfires to 0999 to make a donation. And by the way, speaking of making a donation, Eric, do you want to talk about how Comcast NBC stepped up here?
Yeah, I think it's important that we give people their flowers when they do good. I mean, we'll be the first to complain when things don't go wrong. But someone like the Comcast at NBC Universal donated $10 million cash to the Los Angeles Relief Organization. So you can go on and kind of see the specifics. But for the most part, obviously Red Cross is what we talked about. But there was Habitat for Humanity in Greater Los Angeles. Yeah, the fire departments, regional food bank, YMCA. So, I mean, there's a lot that's going on out there. And there's graphics out there that show just the area of Los Angeles. And it's a map, and it's a very interesting map. And it tells a great job telling the story of, if you highlighted the map and it just had LA, and then it also had in red in the rest of the country, any state that had a fewer population was highlighted in blue. And for the most part, LA outranks 40 states in terms of population. So it is an amazing amount of people. We just think of it as a city, but it is more than most states out there. So there are a lot of people out there. So I think it's great that they're giving back. And I think Disney gave back too. So just anybody that can give in this situation, there's a lot of people that will need it.
No, absolutely. And again, just want to applaud the folks at Comcast for stepping up here, and let's just hope for better news in the weeks ahead. But anyway, shifting now to Florida.
Let's go to Florida.
Frosty, freezy Florida, which, but that's going to heat up later this week, with Rock the Universe, which, that's being held at the Universal Studios Florida on the 24th and 25th of January, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about this in a previous episode, but I thought, hey, if you're listening in and you don't have anything to do in your local or your couple little drive, 24th, 25th, head down there. It's their, they have the top artists, Christian artists, experiences, and you say it can get pretty hopping down there. Is it like tour buses and a lot of church groups go there, right?
It does, and what's kind of interesting is it's actually, if you're there, it's a great night to go to the park if you just want to ride stuff.
Right.
Because the crowd is largely there to see that, again, you've got some of the top acts in Christian music there. So they're there to see their favorite performers. Whereas if you want to get on the Simpsons ride 20 times in a row before it closes in 2028, that might be a good idea.
So, Christian rock fans or Simpsons fans, head down now.
There we go.
This weekend's a great time.
Okay, and speaking of the Simpsons ride, the gentleman who helped design that attraction, former Imagineer Mike West, actually did a Q&A for Universal this past week. In fact, it was live back on January 17th, but it was about the Skull Island Reign of Kong ride, which and you've done that with the family.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're not the biggest fan, right? I believe it was an early episode. You gave us your opinions on the movie and or the ride. But as for us, I thought it was fine. We've done it multiple times now.
Well, I love Mike. Mike. His themed entertainment professional worked all the way back on early Epcot, and the fact that he knew to end that thing with a bang. And
oh yes, I would have been disappointed. Listen, I'll tell you right now, Jim, if there wasn't the animatronic at the end, I would have been a bit disappointed. We needed that.
Yeah.
Because I felt like that is Universal through and through. It might not be the one that, I've seen on the movie or the TV shows, the old attraction, but it's still impressive. I don't know if there's banana breath.
There we go.
I can't remember that.
But no.
Lots of bugs and guts in that one.
There we go. But Mike was the guy who knew we need to end with a bang. We need a giant Kong figure, so let's do that. But anyway, again, Mike did. Universal Creative announced this through Instagram. He recorded this Q&A back on January 17th, and we were just checking prior to starting the show here, and I guess after the fact it's available, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And let's be, since we're saying it Q&A, you're thinking, but it's spelled Q as in Queue. Right. So he goes through the queue and he explains stuff. So you can even, I think it's a 3-minute video, so it's not super long, but it's super, when they're, queues are pretty important nowadays with attractions, especially if there's a long line.
There we go.
So he goes through and talks about it. And I believe, wasn't there jump scares originally in that queue?
Yeah.
And then they took that out.
Yeah.
One day we should talk about that, because I'd love to know what happened there and how many times did people pass out before they were like, all right, we can't do this.
There we go. Okay. Now, I think we mentioned earlier on in today's show that Eric and I are recording this on Monday, January 21st, which, as it turns out, is also the very same day that the Universal Stella Nova Resort has thrown open its doors. So, and the nice folks at Orlando Informer are there on site. And in fact, I think our partner in crime, Mr. Test, is there right now.
Oh, yeah.
But what do you think of what you've seen so far?
Well, tell you the truth, Jim, it was actually interesting. And I don't know when it was, but there was a slew. They must have invited a lot of influencers in maybe last week. So there are lots of videos out there. And I watched 2 or 3 of them, and I scanned this article here pretty well. So you can see all the pictures and stuff as of, right now. And then by this point in time, people actually slept in the beds, but they had many people in. So I watched, a 20-minute going through every single room, and very nice, looks immaculate. It's themed based off of like a space or like a lunar theme, obviously, hence by the name. And there's lots of stars and galaxies over there, but super, super clean. Have you got to check out any of the pictures or any of the videos that came out?
Well, you have to understand that Mr. Test and I will be recording a show this Thursday with his impressions. And so it's one of these things where it's like I'm waiting for Len to break the seal, so to speak.
Right.
I will take a look at what he shares, but beyond
Right.
that, I've been good. I mean, for example, I note from the information that you shared here that the Orlando Informer put out there, like, what is it, the 750 double queen rooms with calming teal and purple tones. That's an interesting choice.
Right.
But
Well, I thought the rooms are, I mean, it looks, when we were watching it and my daughter Lainey thought it looked very much like Star Wars, right? So she's almost thinking it, and I thought it was really cool. The reflective tiles out front are awesome looking. And when you're in the room, there's the actual windows are all kind of circular. So it almost kind of seems almost like cruise ship like. You look out and you kind of see some of it in the way it's shaped. But they have, everything is super clean, sleek, and on the third floor, and it seems like it's only the third floor, they have a hallway in which the hallway's all black, but on top they actually have stars, like little lights that seem to like travel. So something cool to seek out if you're there. Hopefully Len stays on that third floor, or at least checks it out. But I thought this was a good tease to go over and listen to the Disney Dish for sure, because we could talk about how we like the pictures, but Len's going to talk about how he liked the bed or how the food tasted and so forth. So it's interesting to hear.
And just a reminder, folks, we'll be recording that on Thursday, but that will post on Monday, the 27th. So, all right, we'll tell you what, that seems like a good sized news segment. So why don't we shut this down? And we'll get ready for a feature segment on this week's show where, believe it or not, folks, we're going to talk about the Munsters.
This episode is brought to you by Companion. Iris and Josh seem like the perfect match, but when a weekend getaway turns into a nightmare, Iris realizes that things aren't as perfect as they appear. From the creators of Barbarian and the studio that brought you The Notebook comes a twisted tale of modern romance and the sweet satisfaction of revenge. Companion, only in theaters January 31st. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Okay, and we're back. And we always like to acknowledge our listeners here on the Epic Universal podcast. And Tito, who evidently a fan of the show, reached out about one of our more recent features, the one where we talked at length about Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. And Tito had kind of an interesting follow-up question. He said, I enjoyed you and Eric's recent discussion of Universal's Monster Rally movies, but I wondered where the Munsters TV series fit into all this. Was that an attempt by Universal in the early 60s to revive its classic Monsters line? And, well, the answer is, Tito, sort of. Truth be told, around the very same time that the first Monster Rally movie was made, and just to remind you, that was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which went into production in October of 42 and then was released to theaters in March of the following year, 43. Animation master Bob Clampett, who had spent the past decade working over at Warner Brothers on some of the very best Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. This guy in the early 1940s was feeling the need to spread his wings. And by that, I mean, Bob had worked for that same animation studio since 1931. And Clampett felt that he'd done everything he could with Porky Pig and Daffy Duck, which, by the way, the new Looney Tunes movie, the Day the World Blew Up, which will be arriving in theaters next month on February 28th.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Very much done in the Bob Clampett style. And by the way, it even stars Porky and Daffy, which is a pair of cartoon characters that Bob regularly had team up. He just loved the mayhem that you could get when Porky and Daffy took on a task. Like, for example, when these two ran a baby making factory. And yes, you heard that right, folks. There is a classic Looney Tunes shirt called Baby Bottleneck. And if you need a laugh right now, and we were just talking about the wildfires out in California, maybe you really do need to laugh right now. Stop what you're doing, head on over to YouTube, watch this Bob Clampett classic, and you can thank Eric and I later. But anyway, once again, it's 1943. Clampett is feeling a little burned out, at least as far as the Looney Tunes are concerned. And he wants to try his hand at a different set of characters. And so when Bob sees Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, especially that film's finale where Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman battled and trashed this mad scientist lab.
The fight scene.
There we go. He gets this idea. And so he goes to Universal Management and says, look, what if we did a series of animated shorts where we see the Universal classic monsters, well, as normal actors. By that I mean they still look like monsters. But for example, we meet the Wolfman at home in the morning. You know, he gets out of bed, he's wearing pajamas. Then he goes to the bathroom and he brushes his teeth and he combs his face. But then because he's a dog, he goes to the back door, all right? And his lovely wife opens the door so he can go out and do his business. But again, because he's a wolf man, before he goes out, he grabs a newspaper, he gets a cup of coffee, and then he runs behind a bush. And as you hear all of these man groaning with relief noise, Clampett wanted to put up as a gag a sign that said censored.
Jim, this needed to happen.
Well,
I like this. This sounds so Looney Tunes.
Well,
that's great.
But that's it exactly. Just taking that Looney Tune aesthetic, that Looney Tunes feeling, and applying it to the Universal monsters, and just showing them when they're off camera and they're just dealing with the same day-to-day crap that we deal with. Like, for example, you know, he wanted Dracula to go to the dry cleaner and discover that they'd shrunk his cape. And it's like, oh, come on. And so he put together this great presentation for the animated version of the Universal Classic Monsters. And he says, hey, guys, this could be a series of shorts. We could have a lot of fun with this. And whereas the executives at Universal, at this point, they've only made the one Monster Rally movie. And again, that's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman in 43. They don't yet realize that there's 3 more of these things that are going to happen. House of Frankenstein in 44, House of Dracula in 45, and then Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein in 48. And long story short, Universal executives just didn't see the value in what he was pitching. So they took a pass on his silly animated version of the classic Universal monsters, which, by the way, okay with Bob. He just moved on to his next idea, which was a show that could be done on that brand new medium, television. And that one, maybe you've heard of, Time for Beanie or The Beanie and Cecil Show. By the way, the very first version of this TV show, Time for Beanie, again, this from 2025 to describe this show. It's a 15-minute long puppet show. All right, that was done at KTLA in Hollywood back in 1949 and was so successful it began airing nationally the following year in 1950, ran for a total of 5 seasons. And back in the day, Time for Beanie was hugely popular and had some very, very high-powered fans.
Big fans of the puppet, huh? Like a puppet show?
Well, but I'm serious. There is a very famous story about the time Albert Einstein is at Princeton. He's addressing this group of Nobel Prize winning physicists. And in the middle of his lecture, Einstein glances down at his watch, pauses, and goes, "You'll have to forgive me, gentlemen, but it's time for Beanie." And then Einstein gathers up his papers, strides off stage, and goes straight back to his office, where he then sits and watches that day's episode of Bob Clampett's Puppet Show. And I just, I love that. I love
Jim,
that
we
story.
need more people like that today. I mean, I'm thinking these entrepreneurs or anyone that creators just be like, sorry, I have to go watch The Simpsons.
Yeah,
It would
no,
be that's my kind of people.
no, that's it exactly. You are not wrong. We need more people who stop. I would love to talk to you physicists, but I got to go watch the puppets.
Priorities.
All right, now as for the second version of this television show, the Beanie and Cecil show, that one was animated, premiered on ABC in January of '62, and actually aired on Saturday nights. But I'll tell you what, in a moment, folks, we're going to talk about some other animated series that aired in primetime and what that had to do with the Munsters. But first, this. Okay, and we're back. All right, so we were just talking about primetime animation. Late 50s, early 60s. Interesting time for animation, especially over at ABC, where no less than 4 animated series initially aired in primetime. Now, Rocky and His Friends, that one actually aired just out of prime time, twice a week on Tuesdays in the late afternoon. This animated series started in November of 1959. Weird part, Eric, it after Rocky and Friends debuted, it then went on to become ABC's highest rated daytime program.
Hey, we love flying squirrels.
There we go.
I'm really surprised though. I didn't know it was called Rocky and His Friends. It seems kind of odd because if you told me which one was the star, the headliner, it wasn't Rocky.
Well, but that's where it gets fascinating, where this Jay Ward show then moves to NBC in September of 1961, where, by the way, it does change its name from Rocky and His Friends to The Bullwinkle Show. But the part of the story that just blows my mind is that NBC then begins airing this animated series on Sunday nights in prime time as the lead-in to Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color.
Wow. That's a big honor.
That is. I mean, and Bullwinkle went on at 7, and then the Disney show ran from 7:30 to 8:30 on NBC. By the way, of course, there was the Flintstones, which debuted on ABC September of 1960. That aired in primetime on Friday nights, and the success of the Flintstones spurred ABC to take a chance on a second animated show for prime time, and that was the Jetsons, which debuted September of '62, and that one aired on Sunday nights. But anyway, back to Beanie and Cecil. That airs in prime time on ABC starting in January of that same year, '62. Anyway, around this time, Alan Burns and Chris Hayward, who were the head writers on The Bullwinkle Show, they go to executives at Universal with their idea for a new animated series, which would have been about this family of monsters that lived out in suburbia. Now, Burns and Hayward called their pitch Love Thy Monster, which was a riff on the old homily, Love Thy Mother. And they come to Universal with this pitch in mid 1963. And while Alan and Chris are obviously pros when it comes to animation, they've had a lot of success already with the Bullwinkle Show. Executives at Universal initially hesitant to green light this project. And Eric, what's interesting about this, it has nothing to do with the show itself. It's just the fact that behind the scenes, at this point in time, MCA, the outright owner of both the motion picture and the television operations at Universal Pictures, was in the process of merging these two separate entities into one single mega media corporation, which they were then calling Universal City Studios, Inc. So literally for much of 1963, it just wasn't a good time to get anything new started at Universal. The executives there were distracted with this merger. But anyway, on the other side of finally getting this done, what gets the attention of executives at Universal is the news that MGM is prepping a new sitcom for ABC, one that would be based on those gruesome single-panel cartoons that Charles Addams had been doing for The New Yorker since 1938. But again, here's the interesting thing. This show, which was going to be called The Addams Family, even though it was based on all of these single panel cartoons, wasn't going to be animated. It was going to be done live action. And since MCA had just sorted out how its newly realigned motion picture and television divisions were going to work together, who did what, this idea, the idea of doing a live action horror themed sitcom, that really intrigued them. And we'll get to that, how that idea for a TV show eventually became the Munsters in the second installment of this series, which will be next week on the Epic Universal podcast.
See, I always wondered how the Addams Family and the Munsters, like a lot, if they were copycats of one another or how that went, but it sounds like they kind of stirred up the other one to get things going.
Oh, so. Yeah, it gets weirder still. But again, we'll discuss that next week. So as we bring things here to a close on this week's episode of the Epic Universal Podcast, Eric, where can the nice folks find you on social media?
Hey, you can find me anywhere. Pretty much all the social media is at Eric Hersey. So if you have any show ideas or pictures or updates on the parks, send them over. And how about with you, Jim?
Well, as always, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you call it. Likewise, Instagram at Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook at Jim Hill Media News. And I guess that's going to wrap it up for this week's show, folks. And so thanks for listening to this episode of the Epic Universal Podcast. And please stick around for what's coming up this month over on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode. And if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Len Testa or animation and movie news. Please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcasts, like The Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about our podcast and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.